Here's my quick first impression on living in the US. I arrived to LA exactly a week ago, and
Europeans hate Americans, according to Europeans. Before we get into it, this is just for fun. This topic came up in a European co-living that I was in, and I took notes, and they're too good not to share. I have more of these culture chats in the playlist, and feel free to follow if you're interested. Let's get it.
Here's a question worth sitting with. If you asked most Europeans right now what they think of America, would the answer be warmer or colder than it was 5 years ago? According to the polling, colder, a lot colder. And that's exactly what makes this story interesting. Because it's not the story the headlines are telling.
If you're an American, you can probably not relate, but all this, for European, feels like we're right inside of a movie. Like these type of houses, of course with the American flag, or the little bench on the patio. So cute. I can totally see the pumpkins that will be placed here in fall. A lot of Europeans grow up watching American movies, and the scenery we only know from movies. This is why it feels.
If you want more videos like this, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because we're going to keep digging into stories where the numbers and the lived experience don't line up. Start with the numbers, because they're stark. YouGov's Eurotrack surveys this year found favorable views of the United States sitting around 20% in Denmark, 29% in Sweden, and roughly a third in Germany, France, and the UK Pew Research, surveying more than 42,000 people across dozens of countries between February and May of 2026, found European views of the US and its president more negative than almost anywhere else in the world, Sweden at just 19% favorable, and majorities across 10 European nations saying they don't trust the American president to do the right thing on world affairs.
I'm a Brit living in America, and I just wanted to share some hope for those on their journey to moving to America. One day, you're going to be eating.
The European Council on Foreign Relations put out a survey this spring, where roughly 1 in 10 Europeans now describe the U.S. as an ally at all. This is, in the pollsters' own words, a genuine collapse in trust, the worst numbers some of these trackers have recorded since they started asking the question back in 2016.
Y'all know why the Europeans and people from all over the world are loving Americans? It's because for the first time ever, everyday people are center stage, not our government, not our policies.
So layer the World Cup on top of that. Tourism Economics projected 1.24 million international visitors would come to the U.S. for the 2026 tournament, spending somewhere north of $5 billion combined. But the U.S. Travel Association's own April report was unusually blunt. It warned that visa costs, entry barriers, and safety perceptions could keep America from cashing in on the opportunity in front of it. Transatlantic flight bookings for the summer ran well below the previous year. Roughly 80% of hotels in host cities reported bookings falling short of projections. This wasn't a normal year to expect open arms. And that's the actual hook of this video, not Europeans are falling in love with America. Because in aggregate, they clearly aren't right now. The interesting story is what happens to a specific person's opinion when they show up anyway. Skeptical, primed by a year of bad polling and worse. Headlines, and then have an ordinary human encounter that doesn't match what they expected. That gap between what people believe about a country in the abstract and what they experience of it up close is where this video lives. To be clear about what you're about to hear, the anecdotes in this video are composite scenes illustrative, not verified individual case studies built to represent patterns that show up again and again in travel forums, reaction videos, and post-World Cup interviews, rather than direct transcriptions of any one named person's story. Where a number appears, it's coming from the sources named on screen, not invented for effect. Take the hospitality angle first, because it's the one that keeps showing up, almost despite itself, in the comment sections under reaction videos. Picture a Scottish visitor in Kansas City after a group stage match. Credit card declined at a barbecue counter, and a stranger 3 people back in line quietly covers the tab without making a scene about it. Picture a German family in Atlanta, jet-lagged and lost near the stadium, and a police officer walking them 4 blocks out of his way while cracking jokes about their team's chances. Picture a Dutch couple in a diner outside Houston, invited to a cousin's backyard cookout by people they'd met 20 minutes earlier. None of these are transcripts. They're composites of a pattern, small, unscripted generosity towards strangers that recurs constantly in the informal travel commentary around the tournament, even from visitors who came in with low expectations of the country politically. Would you rather live somewhere colder and more reserved with strangers, or somewhere warmer with people, but messier and louder about almost everything else? Sit with that, because it's the tension running through most of this video. Now the scale question, because this is where the sensory contrast really lands for a lot of European travelers. A Buc-ee's gas station in Texas can run past 50,000 square feet, with dozens of fuel pumps genuinely closer in size to a small department store than anything most Europeans would call a petrol station. Supermarket aisles run wider, cart sizes run bigger. Portion sizes at a mid-range restaurant can be double what's standard in Lisbon or Lyon. Picture a French tourist doing a visible double take at a single entree meant, by American standards, for one person.
I want to live in America so bad. I want to live in America so flipping bad. Like I want to do cheer. I want to say yo. Like I want to.
It's an easy comic beat, but it's also a real signal of a country built around abundance and space, in a way that's structurally different from a continent where cities were laid out centuries before the automobile. Then there's raw geography, and this is where a lot of European assumptions about history and scale get quietly humbled. The U.S. spans 4 time zones in the contiguous states alone, and driving from New York to Los Angeles covers roughly the distance from Lisbon to Moscow. Yellowstone alone is larger than several small European countries combined. A Swedish tourist expecting a couple of hours between World Cup host cities can find themselves staring at an 8 or 9 hour drive, instead a genuinely disorienting recalibration for someone used to crossing 2 or 3 countries in that same window. Would you rather have 1,000 years of walkable history within a single afternoon's train ride, or have to drive most of a day just to reach the next mountain range? Both are real trade-offs, not just talking points. Safety is the trickiest one to be honest about, because the real data cuts both ways, and a good version of this video has to say so. Crime statistics, school shooting counts, and gun ownership rates in the U.S. are genuinely different from almost anywhere in Western Europe, and no honest video pretends otherwise. But the lived tourist experience in the specific, controlled bubble of World Cup host, cities' heavy policing, dense crowds, daylight events tends to be uneventful, and that gap between statistical risk and moment-to-moment experience is worth naming rather than glossing over. Picture an English fan group in Miami, tense for confrontation after months of headlines, encountering instead an unremarkable, well-managed crowd and a slightly bored-looking police presence. That doesn't erase the national statistics. It just means one specific, police, tourist-facing slice of the country isn't representative of the whole picture, a distinction worth sitting with, rather than picking one side of. Now the economy, and here the real numbers are genuinely double-edged, which is worth respecting rather than flattening into a highlight reel. On paper, American wages for comparable roles run meaningfully higher than European equivalents. One 2025 employment cost study found total employment costs in major European cities running up to roughly 48% lower than U.S. equivalents for the same role, driven mostly by lower base salaries. Median U.S. household income sits north of $83,000 a year, but the cost side is not simple either. Numbeo's 2026 index puts the U.S. cost of living almost dead even with Germany, and healthcare is the line item that tends to swallow the wage advantage. American households routinely spend $6,000 to $12,000 more per year on healthcare than European households with comparable coverage, according to comparative cost analyses this year. Higher pay, higher risk, higher variance, that's the honest shape of it, not simply richer. Picture a Danish nurse working a World Cup volunteer shift in Dallas, doing the mental math on what her Texan counterpart earns compared to her own salary back home, and coming away thinking neither system has fully solved it, just traded one set of problems for another. Patriotism and identity are where a lot of European visitors report the strongest emotional whiplash, because the volume is simply turned up differently. Anthem before a match. Flags on porches in small towns nowhere near a stadium. A level of unguarded public sentimentality about the country that reads as either moving or slightly much, depending entirely on who's watching. Picture a Dutch visitor in a small Georgia town, expecting irony or detachment around a 4th of July adjacent event, and instead finding people who mean every bit of it, no wink, no self-deprecation. That sincerity is either the most attractive or the most alienating thing about the country, and which one it is says as much about the visitor as it does about the place. Food culture rounds this out, since it's one of the more visible day-to-day frictions for European visitors. Tipping culture alone trips up a huge share of first-time visitors. 20% has become close to a floor rather than a ceiling at most sit-down restaurants, a structural difference from the service-included norm across most of Europe. Drive-through culture, the sheer footprint of a mid-size American grocery store, the fact that small on a soda menu can be what would be labeled large in Berlin. These are small frictions, but they add up into a genuinely different relationship with food as something abundant and available rather than portioned and deliberate.
So I'm here in America, I'm in Albuquerque, and I'm not used to like the drinks. Like if you look here, you've got all these options. Powerade, no sugar, sparkling water, vitamins water, no sugar.
So where does that leave the broader picture? Not with Europeans falling in love with America. The polling this year says clearly that they aren't, in the aggregate, and pretending otherwise would just be a different kind of dishonesty. What the ground-level pattern actually suggests is narrower and, frankly, more interesting. Individual encounters, so a stranger covering a bill, a cop cracking jokes, a family pulling up an extra chair, don't erase a year of bad headlines or a stack of unfavorable polls, but they do seem to complicate them, person by person, in ways that don't show up cleanly in a national survey. A visitor can leave still critical of American foreign policy, healthcare costs, or gun laws, and also leave having met people who were kind to them in ways they didn't expect. Both things can be true in the same trip, and most of the honest travel commentary this year reflects exactly that mix rather than a clean verdict either way. So here's the actual question to leave you with. Would you rather judge a country by its polling numbers or by the specific people you happen to meet in it? Most people, if they were honest, end up doing some uneasy mix of both, and that mix is probably closer to the truth than either extreme. If this kind of comparison is useful to you, like the video, share it with someone who'd argue with you about it, and subscribe for the next one in this series. One last thing, stated plainly. This video is a compilation drawing on public polling data, tourism industry reporting, and composite illustrative scenes built from recurring patterns in traveler commentary. It is not a transcript of verified individual interviews, and it doesn't represent the full social or political reality of any country, nor official policy of any government. Composite scenes are marked as such because they're illustrative, not documentary evidence. Nothing here should be treated as investment, legal, or immigration guidance, and no single visitor's experience should be read as a universal verdict on either continent.